Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to COVID-19 and Beyond, supporting all students using education technology. We're really excited to present today for the National Catholic Education Association Conference. So I am excited to go ahead, and if I can move that, there we go. I'm excited to introduce myself and Caitlin. So Caitlin, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Caitlin Hay. I am the school counselor at St. Cletus in Gretna, Louisiana. I have been a school counselor for about 5 years now, and this is my third year at St. Cletus, and I love working at my school. I'm also currently getting my PhD in counseling, and I'm very excited to share with you some of the new and different ways that my school has incorporated technology within the last couple of years. And hopefully I can share with you some different ideas that maybe you can try in the future.
Yeah, thank you. And my name is Melissa Cordo. I was a special education teacher in New York City public schools. I'm also the product of a Catholic school in Connecticut. And as a special educator, I built our inclusion movement. And so I was the first co-teacher at the high school that I worked at. And by the time I left, we had 14 co-teaching teams across grades 8 through 12. And I am now the founder of Education Modified, which is an education technology platform to help reduce workload for special education teams and really bring special education out of compliance and back into the instructional world, and really creating more inclusive classrooms for all. So today we're going to focus on understanding the different challenges of inclusion in today's classrooms, and then learn ways that education technology can improve different inclusive practices, including bringing stakeholders together to support students with different types of learning needs. So, as Caitlin had mentioned, embracing technology is something that we've all had to do over the past couple years, and learn to not only accept, but really utilize, particularly during the pandemic. And also education technology provides a huge advantage to creating more inclusive settings and supporting all learners. And so we'd like to highlight some ways in which we can do that by first focusing on understanding what some of those challenges are in inclusion. We work with hundreds of Catholic schools all over the country. We work with the Archdiocese of New Orleans and Kansas City and Missouri and Boston here in Massachusetts. And one of the things that we notice is that every school has the same challenges for special education. The first is that information lives in several different places and isn't accessible to all stakeholders. The second is that communication is, disparate across different modalities. Some people are using email, some people are in person, some people are documenting in spreadsheets or Google Docs. And then lastly, there's limited resources. And so down on the ground, what we try to work with different schools on, and what St. Cletus has prioritized, is getting information in one place and accessible for all stakeholders, providing job embedded resources that are available to teachers when they need it within their workflow, streamlining communication between different stakeholders among special ed teams. What does that communication look like between special ed teachers and general ed teachers or administrators, differentiating instruction, and then lastly, actually delivering accommodations for students with special needs. Oh my goodness, I don't know what's happening with my, there we go. And so one of the things that we hear all the time, and these pictures might resonate with you, is that in some of your schools, you are still using paper and pencil to document things. There's a lot happening in what we call here at EdMod the digital transformation for schools, in that it's really time to be able to move beyond the sort of paper and pencil systems, and that it's really not sustainable going forward. And that's for both students who are diagnosed and undiagnosed. So students that have accommodation plans or not, just getting information into one place. The second thing that we see is that teachers are just doing their own thing, quote unquote, when it comes to documenting and tracking and data collection. And so every teacher is kind of doing something differently, where in a building, that's not sustainable, especially when there's a lot of turnover, when you have more students with more diagnosed or undiagnosed needs. And then there's no unified system across the district when students move from like the elementary school to the high school or the middle school. And then lastly, that specialized content or supports is, all over the internet, and that teachers must find their own supports and instructional resources, and that they're also responsible for keeping each other informed, right? And have to lean on each other for finding that information, which often takes hours and hours. And so we'd like to highlight some of the things that, St. Cletus has done over the past couple of years, with Caitlin being one of the leads and really leveraging technology. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Well, so the first thing that we started doing was needing to get everything into one place. And like Melissa said, everyone just kind of had everything everywhere. We had a lot of paper, and I like organization, and I like to know where things are. So I came in and I saw the giant filing cabinets full of paper, and it kind of overwhelmed me. And I said, this can't happen. And I wanted to make sure that our teachers were getting information in one place that was just very easily accessible. So we had Google Drive, and we had Google Classroom, and it was being used prior to the pandemic. But I think really having to go on lockdown, having to go doing distance learning when school was let back in, we had to really lean more towards our digital platforms. So the teachers were willing to use everything at our disposal. Then we found EdMod, and that really did help. And it became so easy to just upload all of these adjustment plans and to ensure that our teachers had all of the information that they needed. And it was right there in front of them. They could easily pull it up on their computers. And then future teachers could see it too. So each student's strengths are there, and any important information, any parent information, documents, demographics, any academic adjustments were there. So while we had the Google Drive that they could easily upload any work that they needed in, we also wanted a place where they could document what was going on throughout the day, any important conversations that were being had, anything that was needed that all stakeholders needed to be aware of. And it would also help limit the amount of paper that we had just floating around the school. I know a lot of times I had teachers coming up to me saying, well, I didn't know that we were supposed to do this for a child. And I would sit there and say, well, it was on their plan. What do you mean you didn't know? We signed it, but they were like, well, I haven't seen that plan for a while. Now they can pull up the plan and it's right in front of them. And I love that. I wanted something that was FERPA compliant that we could go through and use. And finding EdMod has been wonderful in that aspect. So those are the things that we've really implemented with getting things into one place. So the teachers can use Google for just classroom instruction, but EdMod can be for getting all of the other things in place.
Yeah, great. The second thing, I'm sorry, my mouse on my computer is very finicky. The second thing that we focused on at EdMod, but really one of the things that we noticed, particularly when it came to teachers' time, is just having those resources available to teachers. So go ahead and share a little bit on how you've sort of worked on solving that at your school.
Well, so one of the things with time was we had a lot of times where the teachers would say, like, there's just no time for that. There's no time for me to do this. And I'm going to get more into in a little bit later how we solved some of that issue with some other things. But when it came to, well, I don't have time to figure some certain things out, we were able to say, like, okay, well, if you don't have time to look up something, you know, what's really cool is EdMod had strategies. If you go on to not just for the kids, but in your classroom, if you go and look, it can pull up strategies you can use either whole group or individually. So I thought that was really cool too, that you could pull up whether it was for one kid with a diagnosis or just if you could type up what a certain issue you thought was and just search through it, and it would give you different strategies that you could try. And then you could even attach it to the student and say, this works. So that way you didn't have to go back and try to figure it out. This year, we actually started a intervention program. It's called Creative Opportunities Leading to Success. We call it our COLTS program. COLTS is our mascot. So what that is intervention for ELA and math. And our intervention specialist can use EdMod, they can look up strategies, and they can even attach it to the kids. So if this worked, they can attach it on there and let the teacher know through the team board, through the strategies, that this works in intervention. You don't have to go search for something. I'm finding this. And that way the teacher doesn't have to go hunt something down. And I think that's wonderful, because there are so many times where even I'm having to look for my lessons, like for my classroom lessons, I have to go on Teachers Pay Teachers and be like, okay, what can I do for this? And now I don't have to, like, you can easily go look like social emotional learning and find something for a whole group or just one kid. I think that's really awesome. But some of the other resources my school uses is we started looking up, well, we started using a lot more of Lexia, and we were using BrainPop and BookFlix, but we also started using Lexia and IXL because we like the fact that it is data. There's a lot of data and it can pinpoint what each student needs. Personally, I love Alexia. I think that is wonderful that it can show you exactly what a child needs to work on to get them where they should be and to get them where they are. I've seen kids that I thought could not read work on Lexia, and all of a sudden they were on 5th grade reading levels in 2nd grade. And it was wonderful. So I'm really enjoying that. I do, like I said, I like the teacher strategies under EdMod, and I like that we can document and set goals on the EdMod. I like how we get to go on like a journey with the student because it follows the students every year. So we get to see what their academic journeys are with these goals, and we can save the strategies. And I just think it's a very good way to communicate what each student is going through.
Great. So continuing with that, one of the other things that I mentioned before and what you just kind of lended yourself to with the journey of a student, right, is streamlining communication and moving towards being able to have conversations with teachers, and something we call here at Education Modified professional memory, being able to move with the student and being able to have that information that is often trapped in professionals' brains, easily accessible through all staff members, right? So whether it's the interventionist, the guidance counselor, the general ed teacher, being able to communicate in ways that is more efficient than before. And so we talked to a lot of schools that have moved towards Slack or Microsoft Teams, sometimes Google Classroom, and then a feature that we have here at Education Modified. So go ahead, Caitlin, let's share a little bit more about what you guys are doing.
So right off the bat, when we came back, or when the pandemic started, we immediately were signing up for Zoom. I think a lot of people did that. We said Zoom was where we need to be. It had a lot of classroom functions that we could use. Thankfully, we haven't had too many cases where we've had to utilize any of Zoom or anything. But when we've had to, it's been wonderful. We've also had instances where, not just because of COVID, but for other reasons, we've had to utilize the Zoom platform. And it has been extremely useful to be able to get on there and to show people what to do. We also, and especially for communication, most of our parent-teacher conferences for the last 2 years have not been able to be in person. And anytime I've had to meet with them, I personally don't like to talk on the phone with parents. I like to be able to see their faces. So to be able to say, I need to look at you. We do have Google, but I preferred something a little bit more. So we went with Zoom. I use Zoom more than I use anything else probably. But I also wanted a way where I could document these conversations that we were having and document anything important conversation wise that was going on, not just with parents, but also with teachers. And I found, while it was great to have these meetings and I could write all my little notes either for myself, and it would be like pencil and paper, where were they going? At the end of the day, it didn't matter because they weren't going anywhere. No one was seeing them but me. And what if I needed to tell someone something important? I just have to communicate it. I liked how EdMod was able to say, okay, we have a team board. You can easily attach whoever you want to this message, you can write up anything. And it even gives you the chance to filter what type of message you want to send. So if I want to write, this is a concern that I have about a student, I can document that. All of my observations that I do for students, I put on EdMod because I find that to be the easiest way to communicate with teachers. This is what I see going on in the classroom. And I just label it observation and the date. I also like that I can do parent communications and I can easily just copy and paste an email and put it on EdMod. And that way the teacher knows exactly this is what was said this date. I've had to utilize it to be like, okay, let me go back and see what did we agree upon? Or even if we have to change adjustment plans or a different adjustment for a student, what works, what doesn't work. The teacher can easily come in and say like, I'm finding this is not working. Do you have something else? Attach my name to it. And then I can go look some stuff up, send it back. And we have documentation backing up. Okay, for how many days did we try this? How long did we go about this? Is it working? Is it not working? No, let's take it. And then I can document, this is the day we took it from. And I can also document telling the parent. So I enjoy that.
Yeah. And I think one of the things about communication that is particularly important for inclusive settings for schools as they're trying to move towards more inclusive environments is that there's even more stakeholders, right, for students than those who don't have special needs or have a diagnosis, and that there's a lot more folks that have to be involved. And so the more that we can collaborate and work together to be able to have those conversations, the better. So again, sorry, there we go. Yes, let's talk some more about some differentiated instruction.
Well, I love differentiation because honestly, everyone learns differently. I mean, the way I learn, completely different than anybody else. And I especially, my prime example is math. I watch these kids do math every day and I sit there and I'm like, I don't think I could do that. That's not for me. But I know it does work for some kids. So I think it's important that we pick out and we find what's working for every kid. And not everything is going to work for every kid. You have to figure out what each kid likes. And I think my teachers are very good at that, of finding what motivates the kids and what they can use. One of the things is we do a lot of blended learning in a lot of centers and pretty much all of the grades. And our teachers enjoy doing anything that makes the kids happy, and we can see that the kids are engaged. So we do a lot of things that also provide a lot of data because we like having something that shows that there's a growth. It just proves that what we're doing is working. So we've been using a lot of IXL and Lexia because it's meeting the kids at their level and it's giving the teachers updates. I like things that are levelized and kind of showing like, okay, here's where your kid is. And instead of making a kid who isn't able to read on a 5th grade level in 5th grade, it's bringing it down to them to where they actually are. And I think that's especially important because it's not fair for a child to do, to be able to read a social studies test on a 5th grade level when they can't do it. It doesn't seem fair to me. So if we can make it a little bit easier or at least bring it to their level, why not? And I find at least IXL and Lexia are able to do that. And the data shows that it's able to bring them at least to their level. We've also been doing a lot with our COLTS program of interventions, pulling the kids, and they're doing these different things to be able to get their reading levels up. The teachers use all of the different things that you see on your screen, because the kids really enjoy it. They're liking Jamboard because they enjoy answering the questions and they like using it for the group work aspect. The kids love Moby Max because it gives them that incentive of, if they complete so many assignments, they have so many minutes of game time. So all of those little things that just anything that you can find that motivates them or that can get them to not be so discouraged about learning, they're enjoying it. And I think that's probably the most important aspect, is to make sure that we're meeting them where they are at, and to make sure that they're at least engaged and enjoying what they're learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And we think about differentiated instruction here at EdMod with content, process, and product. And so when you think about the ways in which, we're giving kids access to content, when you think about different ways in which they can engage with that content, right? Technology plays a huge part of that. The same way with process of how students are processing that information, right? And being able to not only access it on their grade level and in a certain modality, but then being able to process it. And then lastly is product, and how they are then showing you what they are learning. And so all these different programs here are definitely extremely useful for that. And then as we mentioned, Lexia, IXL, some others that we hear at EdMod are iReady, and some of those other ones. So, you can feel free, we'll give you some contact information at the end. Feel free to reach out to either Caitlin or myself about different ways that you can use technology for differentiation. And then the last use for inclusion is really about actually delivering accommodations. And so when we talk about accommodations and modifications here at EdMod, it's really about giving students the support that they need to be the most successful that they can be. And the first process that, Caitlin mentioned at the beginning was that a lot of teachers just don't have access to who gets what accommodations. And it's really hard to actually find those at different points in the day when you need them, right? So at any given point as a teacher, you are creating a test or building a lesson plan or grading something, right? And being able to have access to what student accommodations are needed for students is really difficult. And so having one place to access those, but then also having different options. So Caitlin, I'll turn it over to you to share.
Yes. So when I first started here, everything was paper and pencil. I had to write out everyone's adjustment plans, and it was a lot of write exactly what the doctor says, and that's it. I wanted to make sure, and my school wanted to make sure, that we were providing the best academic adjustments that we possibly could for our learners with different learning needs. We wanted to ensure that those adjustments were being implemented and that every class, including the enrichment teachers, were understanding what was needed. In the past, like I said earlier, I had enrichment teachers coming up and just saying, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do this. And like I said, they may have signed off on a plan at the beginning of the year, but just like any other teacher, by now, let's say it's April, they may not remember what it was. And maybe the kid really hasn't really needed this adjustment in enrichment. And so the teacher's forgotten that they were supposed to do this, but now the work is actually getting harder and the child needs their adjustments. So I think it's a good way. I think we needed to find a way to be able to get this out there instead of just, okay, here, you get a copy and hold on to this copy because I don't want you to lose it. And if you do lose it, you're going to have to come find me, get another copy, or come look at a copy that I have. And even then, now I'm going to have to go dig through my filing cabinet and find it. Another issue that we had was what if the plan changes? Because not everything, like what worked at the beginning of the year might not be working anything else, or might not be working anymore. So depending on what's working, what doesn't work. So I went to my principal last summer. I went to her and I asked if she knew of anything that we could do to make writing these adjustment plans easier, because I was struggling with them. I was tired of writing up the same things and then people losing them, and I was getting frustrated. And I was frustrated with the amount of paperwork I had to keep on file, and I had no physical space for it. So we started asking around. We did exactly what Melissa's going to talk a little bit more about, and that was like asking different people, talking to different schools and finding out what they thought was a good idea. And EdMod came up, and I kept saying, well, okay, I want a place that's secure. I want something online, preferably. I want something secure, and I want something FERPA compliant, and I want something that can be a living document that I can continue to edit when it's necessary. So to address all of this and to help our students, one of the first things that we did before we even bought EdMod, one of the first things we did to help our students with different learning needs was buy reading pens. So I had a lot of teachers say like that they were worried about reading tests aloud because it was going to be a distraction to the other kids in the class. And with COVID, it was really hard to just take kids and put them in another room with another teacher to be read to. It was very difficult. And we also didn't have teachers with time to do that, to dedicate to that. We didn't have subs to come in and do this. And the teachers also struggled to find time to be able to do it individually. There was no time in their schedule to take the kid one-on-one and do it on their own. So one of the teachers and I got together one day over the summer, and we found these reading pens. And it's wonderful because the students can just stick the pens into their headphones, stick them on their ears, and they can take the test with the rest of the class. They don't have to go into another room. They don't have to have the teacher read it to them. They can be right there in class and take the test. So that really did take away a lot of the stress that was on teachers to find time, to make time to ensure that these children were getting these adjustments that said they need their test read aloud. Well, now they are getting their tests read aloud just with a pen. So that took away some of that anxiety that a lot of the teachers were experiencing. However, using the pens, we discovered that some of our students who we thought may have had some reading struggles, and maybe we thought they couldn't read, that wasn't really their issue because the pen was reading for them, and yet they still weren't doing so well. And through using this, we learned that a lot of our students had to actually hear themselves say the words out loud in order to comprehend what they were reading. When we found this out, we tried a couple of different methods, but we always came back to, well, the kids can't just read out loud. It's going to be a distraction. What can we do? We ended up finding the whisper phones, and with that, the student can hold it up just like a phone, or there's even the ones that attach to their heads. My kids have ones that they hold, and they can read it to themselves. So they read it, they whisper it. Now you do have to teach them how to whisper, because I have some that don't know how to whisper, but they're learning. And they whisper what they're reading, and then they can hear it to themselves. And I have found with both the pen and with the whisper phone, the children who need it are benefiting greatly, because we wouldn't have found these out if we hadn't tried these different methods. We wouldn't have found what was working. Then I'll go back to EdMod. At this point, that was when we found EdMod, and it had everything I was looking for because it was FERPA compliant. I could edit the plan. I could edit documents. I could edit the plans. I could update the teachers on anything that I needed to, anything that was going on that they needed to be aware of. I like that it provides the strategies and the resources for different learning needs. And you can use the team board to communicate with all of our stakeholders and attach specific people to certain messages. We can keep track of how our students are doing, and the teachers can document exactly what's being done to help each student. And they can comment how they feel it's working or not working. If a teacher forgets what adjustments a student has, it's very easy to just look it up. They can either look up a student, or they can even filter through their class and just pick a specific adjustment. So like one of our big ones is whether or not a student gets an extra copy of notes. And they can just go and click extra copy of notes, and then it'll filter through and say, here's the students that get an extra copy of the notes. So you don't have to just hope you remember or come and find me and hope that I happen to be in my office when you're looking. I also think that, like I said, when we started our COLTS program, our intervention program this year, it's been really good to have EdMod, because it's been easy to look up which students are even in our program. We can attach them and see like, okay, here are the students that are in the program, and here's what's working for them and what's not working. And then they can let the homeroom teacher know, this is what we do in intervention. This is what's working. And they can use that. They use a lot of Lexia too. So they can take their Lexia, and it gives them specific interventions in Lexia for what they need to do. And they'll print it out, they'll do it. And then the teachers can upload that document onto EdMod and show them, this is what we've done in intervention with it. Here's the direct intervention that we've done, and here's how they did. And then we keep track of it, and we document how they've done over the course of intervention, just to see whether or not they even need to keep coming. And it's been a wonderful thing to have.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you. I think, your school is a really great model for how making some simple technology adjustments can really make a big difference, both in obviously, student outcomes and improvements, but also in saving teachers time. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we've, been facing here in working with so many different schools across the country is, burnout, the great resignation that is happening, and really moving away from these antiquated systems that are really no longer sustainable. And especially for our students who have a piece of technology that can really help them in actually improving either academic or functional outcomes, really is now is the time to try that. So I did want to end here today with sharing some baby steps that your school or your district can make in actually going about vetting and purchasing education technology. And so, the first thing that you can do is just choose one or two areas that you would like to focus on or add to your strategic plan for the fall, and really understanding where your staff and your students would benefit the most. So for example, it might really be in your best interest to improve your accommodations delivery. Yet, for example, if those information about accommodations for students live in a million different places, you really might need to just start with getting information in one place. And so really thinking about one or two areas that you would like to start focusing on, and just choosing that, right? It seems very overwhelming and really having to do all of these things. And so it's really just starting with one or two as a school leader or a building leader or a district leader, just choosing one or two that you would like to focus on. And then the second thing is, there we go, my mouse. The second thing is speaking to other schools and districts and what they have done, right? So the good thing and the bad thing about the COVID-19 pandemic is that really all schools were in this together, right? There was not a single school that, was able to stay in a bubble and not be affected by this. And so every school had to adjust, using Zoom, moving from paper to digital, streamlining their communication. And so talking to other schools and districts and what they're using and what works for them is the best way to really start this sort of search And then the next thing you can do is schedule demos, right? And so any technology company that is a vendor for schools will do demos, as many demos as you need for free to be able to share the information. So, being able to do demos not only with your administration, but with your teachers, have your teachers go on demos and give you feedback on what they think would be most beneficial to them. And again, getting their thoughts and their eyes on products before you purchase it, and then asking the right questions. So making sure that you understand how much things cost, ask how much training is needed to implement a piece of technology is super important. That's something when you think about, I'm sure, the actual implementation piece of it. And that is really overwhelming is, okay, well, yeah, we want to implement technology, but we don't have, 30 hours to train our teachers in these different technologies. And so making sure that you understand both how much training is needed and how long implementation takes. And again, I'm happy to walk through any of this with your staff or with your building administrators. And then lastly, actually building a strategic plan for the fall. So now is really a great time to decide what area you want to focus on, what technologies you want to be able to explore, and then what you can budget for, right? And so thinking about how you can budget for this, when to introduce it to your teachers, connecting with your customer success rep, and then planning and scheduling PD. And, getting started on this now in the springtime leaves plenty of time to actually be up and running with technology for the fall. And so whether it's just moving everything to, Google Drive and training everyone on that, or purchasing a program like, Lexia or Education Modified or Brain Pop, now is a really good time. Making sure that you have all the stakeholders you need to be involved, and then having a plan for the fall. So we're happy to answer any questions that you have. You can go ahead and reach out to Melissa at educationmodified.com. Or to Caitlin. We will make sure to share our information with the rest of the conference. We really appreciate you joining us today and having your ear in learning more about how technology can improve both teacher communication and workload, and reducing stress and burnout, but also improving outcomes for students with different needs. So thank you so much for your time. We look forward to chatting with you further. Enjoy the rest of the conference.